California Democrats fear new carbon standards. Yep, California, your gas prices, they are going up. These new carbon standards could spur a Donald J. Trump reprisal. Might get upset. What's going to happen? Let's get into it. Here we go. So recently, California passed some new carbon standards or fuel standards that many feel the price of gasoline, it's going to go to the moon. Let's check that out real quick before we get into the guts of this one. Gas prices are going down, but maybe not for long. The national average is $3.09. Man, not here in Washington State. Down 10 cents from a month ago. In California, the average is $4.68. That sounds more like Washington gas. Down 16 cents from a month ago. San Francisco is the most expensive in the Bay Area, but it's down nearly a quarter from last month. Well, we're after summer. We're in that lesser consumption period, right? California's gas prices are on the verge of a major increase. We know that in order to be successful in addressing climate change, we must continue to reduce our fossil fuel consumption. On Friday, California Air Resources Board approved updates to the low carbon fuel standard, the LCFS. So we've got that going on. And as that happened, Phillips 66 said, yeah, we've got a really old refinery in California, and it accounts for about 8% of the production in California of gasoline from oil. And they said, oh, we gotta go. No can do. The economics just aren't here. We've got an old plant. It needs a lot of work. We're not going to invest in it because California is not where we're investing in. And another couple of refineries said, well, all options are on the table. We don't really know what might happen. Chevron is basically stating they're going to pull out their headquarters from California and move them to Texas. Yeah, because California just keeps restricting everything to do with fossil fuels. They just want to get rid of the fossil fuels, not realizing that, that is decades away. Decades and decades away. But anyway, let's just go ahead and make that gas as expensive as we can. California legislators signaled concerns with state legislators' newly passed carbon standards, with one of the two appointees who voted against the standards warning the measure's new cost, which the state said could add 47 cents. Yeah, I've read up to as much as 65, but let's go with 50 cents for the cost of gasoline next year. It could empower President-elect Donald Trump to take federal action against the state's climate measures. Ooh, don't want that. Will he, though? Is this a top priority? Yeah, Trump isn't a big fan of Gruesome Newsom, is he? No, especially not with nonsense like this. No, and what Newsom did is he basically said, we've got these price spikes that are really impacting the consumer. So we're going to require these refineries on top of all the other regulation we already have. We're going to just put a little bit more so we don't have, if one of the refineries has to go down to do maintenance, we don't have these price spikes. So we're going to require the refineries to keep a bunch of fuel on hand, and we're just kind of really, we're monkeying with the free market. So it should be fine though. I mean, prices are going to go down. We're doing this for the consumer. And like I've always said, we're here from the government and we're here to help. Yeah, those things don't go together, do they? The amendments were passed in a single 12-hour hearing with little time for meaningful public input or thorough analysis. The expedited timeline, seemingly driven by fears of a potential federal climate rollbacks under a Trump administration, unfortunately left many questions unanswered. So they just jammed this through. Let's put it on through. Wait till Donald sees this. Good Lord, it's not going to be good. So this was written by Dean Flores, a member of the California Air Resources Board that just passed tighter requirements for the state's low carbon fuel standard. California already has the most restrictions that there is out there. I mean, and they've got the cleanest or the least dirty gasoline. And as a result, they can't bring in gas from other states. It's got to be made up special blend just for them. And that's why California, you guys pay as much as you do in gasoline prices. And then here in the state of Washington, we've just got genius leaders that give us a carbon tax and tell us, it's just going to be pennies on the dollar. Well, that's true, but it's like 99 cents on the dollar in taxes. Not quite that bad, but yeah, we've got probably second highest on average gas prices in the United States oftentimes during those peak summer months. Washington does not have cheap gasoline. You'd be surprised. You'd be shocked. You'd think, well, they got all those trees out there. How come gas is so expensive? Regrettably, the decision may end up fueling opposition and empowering climate policy critics like incoming President Donald Trump, who has already argued that California's approach to climate action disproportionately burdens working families, continued Flores. Yeah, I mean, they're the ones that have to commute the furthest, right? As you've got housing prices in California that are already through the roof to the moon, the housing near employment centers is super expensive. So most folks that don't have, six-figure jobs or making $200K a year, something along those lines, they're going to have to live further out and commute. So they're going to take up most of this burden. California's low carbon fuel standard requires transportation fuel producers to meet steadily tightening carbon intensity standards that will reduce the state's transportation-related carbon emissions by 90% by 2046. Producers of fuels that are worse than the rising clean standard, such as petroleum refineries that produce gasoline or diesel, must purchase excess credits from producers of transportation fuel that is cleaner than the standard, such as electric vehicles charging or hydrogen station operators. This is all just, it's almost like a Ponzi scheme, right? And the end result, I always question, because as you're constricting the internal ability for California to produce its own gasoline, it's already importing about 8% of its gas, right? It's already importing that. And then you've got refineries that are going to go down. You've got a handful of those, maybe another 22%. Say you're out 30% of your supply. Well, now you got to bring that gasoline in or that oil in to your refineries from countries like Iraq, Saudi Arabia. Yeah, but I mean, the Middle East. It should be fine, though. I mean, you won't have any supply chain issues. There's a little war over there. I'm sure it'll be fine. It won't really bother anything. Remember during the pandemic when we had a port in California just loaded up with ships? I mean, they were floating out there forever, right? Just waiting to get in. You had the whole massive supply chain issues during the pandemic. Massive supply chain issues. You have one of those now with California's inability to, create its own supply of gasoline. You're going to have some issues. And those price spikes, you think it's bad now? No siree. CARB estimates that the new LCFS will create $105 billion in credits for EV charger operators and $8 billion for hydrogen by 2046, which means a cost of $113 billion largely for makers and ultimately consumers of diesel and gasoline. This new math that we have, it just never makes any sense to me, because now you're going to have to bring in your oil on these massive, massive ships that have terrible, terrible carbon emissions. So you're trying to do all this stuff over here, and then over here, you've just got shenanigans going on. So, and we don't count against any of the metrics, the carbon that the big ships bringing the oil in from Iraq or, Saudi Arabia, somewhere in the Middle East. We don't really count that against any of this carbon emission stuff. So it's literally new math, right? Because poorer drivers tend to live further away from work and many renters cannot charge their EVs at home, LCFS costs are largely carried by states working class that cannot afford electric vehicles that average $783 per month to finance. Remember during the last State of the Union address, Sleepy Joe or Joe Biden? He said, well, we're going to be dependent upon fossil fuels for at least the next decade. And yeah, there was just a loud giggle. Those were all Republicans, by the way, because all the Democrats are what? I mean, it could happen. I mean, yeah, we need more electric cars. Do you ever think about how many people can't afford an electric car? Yeah. And you know what? Manufacturers are having a tough time giving them away. So they've dropped those prices so steadily. And remember in the state of California, this is literally in the state of California. Hey, we're not going to sell any more new cars after 2035. Came up with that genius concept. They're throwing that out there, which isn't really all that far away. There is no way that's a thing. But during that same time, California and the United States, Western United States, had a massive heat wave. I think this was 2 years ago. Huge heat wave. It was toasty. Even here in Seattle, it was hot. California officials were like, we said that we're not going to sell any more gas-powered cars in 2035, but would you mind not recharging your cars this weekend because the energy consumption by the ACs this weekend, the power grid doesn't have the ability to handle all that. So if you guys wouldn't mind just not charging those electric cars and, maybe you could Fred Flintstone it on to the grocery store or whatever. Yeah. I remember that. I remember thinking this is all just nonsense. Major backlash by working class voters could empower the legislator to override CAR, but all but two of those voting members are appointed by the governor. That's weird. That doesn't seem, normal. I expect the Air Board to be responsive to the public and the legislature, said State Assembly Speaker Robert Rivas, Democrat from Salinas. California's refinery operators Valero and Chevron, which operate about half the state's refining capacity, have warned they could leave. Isn't that kind of what California's leadership wants? You guys take all your gasoline and get the F out of here. We don't need you. Got our electric cars. We're just going to charge them up. Yeah. Don't be surprised to see older refiners throw in the towel, exacerbating California's gas prices and supply, said gas analyst Patrick DeHaan in response to CARB's LCFS passage over the weekend. Major price hikes and supply shortages would impact drivers, not just in California, but those in Nevada and Arizona, which rely on California for fuel, because they make it there in California. And Nevada and Arizona, they go there, get a little bit, but California can't take from other states because of their standards, their standards of quality and carbon emissions and clean fuel, least dirty. But hey, let's bring in millions upon millions upon millions gallons of oil and, bring it in by big boat, by big ship that, operates on diesel engines that, throw up those emissions. But don't worry about that. It's all going to be fine. This is all under the guise of, we're leveling out the price spikes for the consumer. No more price gouging of the consumer. It all just sounds like a bunch of nonsense, doesn't it? Yeah. It's kind of what I think. I live in Washington State. It's not nearly as bad as California, but it's no cakewalk either. So that's it for me on this one. Thanks for being here. We'll catch up in the next one. Bye for now.